I think one of the questions coming up, and I might jump to it or I might just add in a new one if it isn't one of the existing questions, is what would I say to younger me in regards to this subject? And what I would say is, do not listen to anybody that tells you anything along the lines of your parents not loving you or you being unwanted or different or anything like that. And I would also say to myself and to anyone else that's going through this same sort of thing, whatever age you are, um, be aware of narratives and be aware that our feelings in a moment can create a story in our minds to validate that feeling or to support that feeling or to help understand that feeling that isn't necessarily true. And a lot of the time that can look like blame. It is a form of blame, I guess. You know, you're sort of blaming, okay, well, I feel this way because this person said that my parents don't love me and my parents did this, which means they must not love me and this person must be right. So therefore it's their fault. Now I can feel better because, well, they're to blame. And that's just not true, because then something else will happen and it'll reaffirm that narrative. And before you know, you're believing a narrative that is fully false and not true. And that's when we end up having these like unnecessary fights and conflicts and stuff. Like, I'm sure you can identify with moments where you've had a narrative in your head. And I tell you, my husband and I are still working on this. It still happens even in our marriage and with my 25-year-old daughter and even with my 4.5-year-old. Okay. But I'm sure you can all identify, and I'm sure you all know of these moments where you end up in an argument or something with someone because you're dead set that their actions were because of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so you go at them, and I'm good for this. I've been a bit bully in a china shop over the years. And you go at them and you're like, you don't love me, and you la 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 la. And they're like, what? What are you talking about? And you're like, yeah, because you did this and you didn't do this and you didn't say this and you didn't do this. So therefore you A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You don't love me. You this, that, the next thing, right? And they're just standing there like a deer in the headlights going, girl, what did you just smoke? Like, what are you? Oh, no, that's not true. And I vividly remember having these moments happen with my parents often. And one thing I wish I'd done more was trust them. When they said, we love you, that is not true. Even though they didn't elaborate, even though they didn't give me more reasoning or understanding, I wish that I had listened to them and trusted them in those moments and not listened to the people that I thought were my friends. All right, moving on. Next question. What traditions or values from your adoptive family shaped you the most? That's a really good question and a really interesting question, and one that I'm not sure I've really thought too much about, because I think it kind of comes back to that whole, well, I was just raised by these people. So it's not so much what values and traditions that I get from my adopted family. It's just what values and traditions did I get from my family. And in episode 3, I'm actually talking about the loss of my mum. And I'll probably touch on this then as well. But my mum was a massive part of values and traditions for me. My dad, he instilled a work ethic in himself. I only remember a few times Dad looking like he was struggling with stuff or seeing him break down or something. And to be honest, it was more in the later years too, when Mum got diagnosed with cancer and stuff. So, Dad was the provider, and he went to work and he came home from work and we had family time and stuff. And then he ran the farm on the weekends. And, talking to him now, I don't think he always enjoyed every aspect of it, and I think it was hard, but I never saw that. We never saw that. He always just got on with it. And, I remember sitting on the tractor with him and going for tractor rides and stuff like that. And on the weekends, we used to go for adventures down the bottom, or he'd have to go and retrieve this ram or this sheep or whatever. And we'd go with him. We'd have to go put out bushfires and stuff. It was just, he just made life fun. Like normal life, our everyday today farm life was fun. But he ran a business in Durban during the week. And then on the weekend, he ran the farm. And then mum too, she sewed our clothes and cooked and stuff. And she ran the farm and she slaughtered the animals and provided us with meat and stuff. They're a pretty epic couple, really. And they provided us with an incredible life and upbringing. Like, it was amazing. It really was amazing. As for values, I guess it's just the normal ones, like don't lie. Be nice to each other, be nice to your brother, look after each other. Yeah, just the normal ones. Don't be a bitch. Like Pink says, do you, be you, just don't be a dick, right? And as for traditions, well, we had some pretty cool traditions. Like every Christmas was a big deal. And it was amazing. Mum and I would do things together like make Christmas mince pies together while listening to Boney M and Cliff Richard. And, we would drive up every Christmas to go and see Dad while he was working, have lunch with him. And he'd go around the corner to this little shop, a little bakery thing, and we'd have bacon and banana toasted sandwiches, which were like the highlight. And on the way up, Mum would have Cliff Richard playing, that Christmas time, mistletoe and wine, children singing Christian rhyme. Now, I know I can't sing. You don't need to point it out. I'm aware, and I'm not singing because I'm trying to get a record deal. I am fully aware that it probably hurt your ears right then, but you'll be fine. Yeah, I don't want to stay too much on this topic because I could go on for ages because there were so much. Traditions were great, and I've been able to take those traditions and pass them on to my children, which has been amazing, especially since we lost Mum young. It's been one way of keeping her alive, so that's pretty cool. All right. Did adoption influence how you raised your own child and now children? Ooh, that's an interesting one. Again, I don't think adoption influenced how I raised my child. I think how I was raised influenced how I raised my child. There were some parts of how I was raised that I took with me, and then there were some parts of how I was raised or parts of my childhood that I made sure I was going to do differently because I didn't want my daughter to feel the way I felt. And we touched on one of those things in episode 1. And it was interesting because I've prided myself on this one thing for years, and it was that I'm going to make sure that if I say to my daughter, you can talk to me about anything, that she can come and talk to me about anything. We touched on episode 1 and how that kind of changed as she got older, as she hit more her later teenage years and transitioning into adulthood. That shifted a little bit and changed, but we've come back to it again, I believe. I don't know, you might have to ask her. But yeah, so it wasn't so much adoption. I think one thing that definitely did influence me in regards to my own child was I fell pregnant out of wedlock. Now, my family's old school and they're old school South Africans, and you didn't do that. I wasn't supposed to be sexing it up outside of marriage, especially at 20. Anyway, I fell pregnant, and, I remember having the subject of adoption addressed. And I remember being very, very stern and absolute about the fact that I was not giving this child up for adoption. And I remember saying to them, why do I need to give my child up for adoption when I'm fortunate enough to live in a country where I don't have to? Now, I didn't know anything about my adoption at this stage. I hadn't met my birth parents yet. I didn't know why they had given me up. And, perhaps something I could have touched on in one of the previous questions was how did it affect me? And one of the things that it did affect me was that whole wondering, why was I given up for adoption? Was I given up for adoption because they didn't want me? Was I given up for adoption because they couldn't afford to take care of me? What was it? The interesting thing is that I sort of clung to the narrative to a certain degree that they didn't want me. However, in South Africa, if you didn't have a job or you weren't able to keep a job, then it was really hard to raise a child. In part 2 of talking about my adoption, I'll talk about finding my birth parents and everything I found out that went along with that. This did impact, like the narrative I had at that point of not knowing whether I was wanted or not wanted. And there definitely was rejection. There definitely was that feeling of rejection. I mean, if someone doesn't want you for whatever reason or can't have you, but they've chosen to give you to someone else, whether it's out of love or not, there is a level of rejection that I would find really hard to believe that not one single person has been adopted did not feel at some point in their life. So I did not want this for my daughter. Over my dead body was my daughter going to have to deal with what I dealt with when she didn't have to. I lived in a country where I was able to be paid to take care of my child. What a blessing. What a freaking blessing. And we'd only immigrated 4 years prior to this, right? And so, yeah, there was definitely one massive impact was no way am I giving this child up for adoption. You can do whatever you like to me. I will move city and go and raise this kid on my own. I don't care. I will struggle to figure it out on my own, but I will do it on my own, and I will not give this kid up for adoption. It is not happening. And clearly abortion was not on the cards either. So all that was off the table. So being adopted definitely did influence that decision. If you could give advice to someone newly navigating adoption as an adoptee, what would it be? So I had so much to be grateful and thankful for. And I know not everyone's adoption story is as wonderful as mine, but irrespective, always just try to find your grounding things. Try not to get swept away in the questions that can't be answered. Try to stay grounded in the awesomeness or the little bits of awesomeness that you have in your life, and maybe try and switch the narrative to, I am lucky to be where I am. I don't know where I might have been if I wasn't adopted, but maybe that is a blessing that I just don't know about yet, right? It may not be, but if we can use these positive narratives, if we can replace the what if narratives and the oh, I don't know and the poor me narratives with actually, let's look at the blessings, I tell you, it's going to help you so much more than dwelling on the what ifs and the trying to fill in the blanks that you actually can't fill in until you reach a certain point in your life where maybe you find your birth parents, but also you may never find your birth parents. And what you then risk doing is living a life ruled by untrue narratives. And no one wants that, because you're going to end up ripping yourself off. No one else. You're going to end up ripping yourself off. And you're too awesome and amazing and brilliant to rip yourself off like that. You just are. So you need to let that go. That's my advice. Just be kind to yourself, love yourself. And if you can, just try and let go of the fact that you're adopted. Just fuck it. Fuck it. Let go of it. Because the times in my life when I did were the best times of my life. Anyway, whether you cried in the shower or laughed until you snorted this week, just remember that you are still killing it. All right? You're still killing it. It's all part of the journey. You're freaking awesome. And that's it for this week. Keep shining through the shit. And I'll meet you right here again next time. And remember, the rain and the sun complement each other. Without one, the other doesn't exist. Now go kick some butt shining ass.